Hello everyone. Now I am starting Java interview question series. In this series, I will cover all the Java interview question. Today we will see the constructor concept and its all interview question. So the first question is, what is constructor? All we know, constructor means it is a block of the code like a method. Also we can say that constructor is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object. In other words, constructor is a special member function of a class used to initialize the instance variable of a class. Now, what is the syntax to declare the constructor? To declare the constructor inside the public section of the class, we follow the following syntax like access modifier and the name of the class, and here we will pass the parameter. If our constructor is a no argument constructor on the default constructions, so there is no need to pass the parameter. But if we use the parameter constructor, then we have to pass here the parameter. Now see, it is an access modifier like public, and it is a class name. Means there is a one rule to declare the constructor, that constructor name should be same as a class name. So here our class name is a rectangle. So we create the constructor rectangle. Here rectangle is a class that must be the same as the name of the class that contains the constructor, and it is compulsory. Public is an access modifier that indicate other classes can access the constructor. A constructor can be declared as public, protected and private. Public, protected and private, these are all the access modifier. Non-access modifier like non-access modifier cannot be applied with the constructor. But by mistake, if you apply any modifier with the constructor except these three access modifier, you will get the compile time error. Next question is, why are constructor needed? Also we can say that what is the use of the constructor. Suppose we have a class name student and we have an instance variable name and the roll number. So we create the variable string name and the int roll. Now, if we create the 1000 object, then JVM will initialize this value with a default name. Like we take a data type of name string, then it will be the null, and we take a data type for the roll number is a int, so it will be the 0. Identifying this individual object is not possible, and assigning value to each object will increase the code, and it is a bad practice. So to avoid this kind of thing, constructor are used. So the purpose of Java constructor is to initialize the object. Means if we use here the constructor, then it will initialize the object like name equal to none and roll number equal to 0. Next question is, what are the rules for defining the constructor? Defining the constructor means first is the name of the constructor must be the same as the class name, and it's a mandatory. There should be a no return type of constructor applicable in a Java, and the applicable modifier of the constructors means access modifier that we can use with constructor is a public, default, protected and private. Constructor can accept any number of parameter, and modifier like final, synchronized, static, abstract are not allowed in the constructor. The constructor does not support the return statement inside its body, and constructor can throw the exception. Means these are the rules to define the constructor. Also, the constructor must not form the recursion. Recursion means from one constructor we call the another constructor. Means suppose we define the two constructor like default constructor and parameterized constructor. So from default constructor we will call the parameterized constructor, and from parameterized constructor we will call the default constructor. So the constructor must not form the recursion. What are the other way to call the constructor? There are the two way to call the constructor. These using the new keyword which create a new object and call the constructor of the specified class. Like if there is a class fraction, so we will create the object of the fraction, like fraction fn is equal to new fraction, and here we pass the parameter 2 and 3. It will create a new fraction object and call the two argument constructor of the fraction class. Means with the help of new keyword, we will initialize the object and call the constructor. Using this and super keyword, which are used to call the another constructor within the same class or superclass constructor. Means first way is using new keyword, and the second way is using the this and the super keyword. Here we create the constructor like for the class fraction, means public fraction, and we use the this 1 comma 1, means it will call the two argument constructor of the same class with a default value. Similarly, public fraction int numerator, means this is a constructor. This is a constructor which accept the parameter int numerator, and when we call the super method, this numerator equal to numerator call the no argument constructor of the superclass, and then set the numerator field of the current object. Now we see the next question. If we call the constructor using this or super keyword, will new object will be the created? Means if we call the constructor using this super, this is a this or super keyword, will new object will be created? No. No new object will not be created if we call the constructor using this or super keyword. These keyword are used, means this or this keyword. These keyword are used to call another constructor within the same class or the superclass respectively. They do not create a new object. But its work, what will be the use of this and super keyword? So it will initialize the current object with a different value or the logic. For example, we have a class vehicle, and here we create a one variable max speed, and for this class we create the constructor public vehicle. This is our default constructor. So how we find this is default constructor? Because this constructor is not accepting any parameter, that's why we say that it is the default constructor. And here we use this dot max speed equal to 100, means it will this will call this variable. Now we create the parameterized constructor. This is the parameterized constructor. How we find this is parameter constructor? Because this is a constructor and it accepts this parameter. This is our parameter int max speed, and now we set the this dot max speed is equal to max speed. This is our second class. We extend the vehicle class. Here we use the extend keywords, means we are using inheritance concept here. And here we define the one variable, that is string color. Now here the default constructor for the class car, here we calling the super method, super keyword, means this super keyword call the parent class constructor, and this class car parent class means is a vehicle. So it will call the default constructor of vehicle, means it will call the this constructor, and not this dot color equal to white. Now other parameterized constructor for the class car, here we pass the two parameter int max speed and the string color. Super max speed means we call the parents parameterized constructor, means this constructor. Now we see the explanation. In this example, the car class inherit from the vehicle class. Class car extend the vehicle. The car class has two constructor, one default constructor and one parameterized constructor. This is our default constructor and this is our parameterized constructor. The default constructor call the default constructor of the vehicle class using super keyword. Means using this super keyword we call the default constructor of the vehicle class, and the parameterized constructor call the parameterized constructor of the vehicle class. using super keyword. Now the next question is why constructor name should be the same as a class name. This is the important rule for the creating of the constructor. So we see the why constructor name should be same as a class name. The constructor name should be same as a class name in Java because it is a convention that help the compiler and programmer to identify the constructor easily. A constructor means what is constructor? Constructor is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object. For example, if the class name is a person and the constructor name should be the person. Here, this is our class name and this is our constructor. If the constructor name is different from this class name, means here we use the person and here we use the any name, it will cause the confusion and error. For example, if the constructor name is human, the compiler will treat it as a normal method, not as a constructor. And the object that we form by the use of the constructor will not be initialized. See, this is a class person and here we create the constructor for the person like means constructor name not same as a class name. So it will not create any object. There will be no initialization of any object. So what will be our answer? Why constructor name should be the same as a class name? If the constructor name not same as a class name, then it will create it as a regular method, normal method, and the construction of the object will not form, means there is no initialization object occur. Next question is why return type is not allowed in a constructor? A constructor means it is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object. In Java, constructor does not have return type because it is not called directly by the user, but by the memory allocation and the object initialization code in the runtime. The new keyword is used to create the new object and call the constructor of the specified class. Means with the help of new keyword, we create the object and call the constructor. The new keyword return the reference of the newly created object, which can be assigned to the variable. If a constructor had a return type, then it would be the confusion and the error for the programmer and the compiler. For example, if the constructor of the person class return the int, so where this value will go? That's why there is no return type is in the constructor. Means if we give the return type to the constructor, then it will create as a normal method. That's why return type is not allowed in the constructor. If we place return type in a constructor, we'll get compile time error. No, we will not get compile time error. If we place the return type, then it will create as a normal method, as we see here, the previous question. It will, so see our answer. No, we will not get a compile time error if we place a return type in a constructor. However, means it will not be as a constructor. If we give the return type to the constructor, so it will not be our constructor, but it will create as a normal method. This means the new keyword will not able to use to create any object, and this or super call method will be the syntax error. Means here we use any super or this keyword, we will get a syntax error. Now next question is, can we define a method with a class name? Means can we define a same method as a class name? Yes, we define a method with the same name as the class name in Java, but it is not good practice to do. This is because it can cause a confusion and error as the method will not be a constructor but a normal method. Means we didn't get any error. Compiler and JVM will differentiate between constructor and the method in Java. Means this is a question how compiler and JVM will differentiate between the method and the constructor. As we know, this is our constructor definition, that constructor is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object, and constructor does not have any return type and its name is the same as the class name. A method is a collection of the statement. We see what is method and what is constructor. Now we see the definition of the constructor, that constructor is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object. And what is method? Method is a collection of the statement that perform the some tasks and it's return the value. Method can have return type and its name can be a anything. The compiler will differentiate between the constructor and method on the basis on following rule, like constructor must have the same name as the class while method can have any name. This is the also this means whether we generate the other question like what is the difference between the constructor and the method. So we can say that constructor must have a return type. Oh, sorry, constructor does not have a return type and method have a return type. Constructor name should be the same as the class name and the method can have any name. ये क्वेश्चन हम बाद में देखेंगे, पहले हम देखेंगे कि हाउ कंपाइलर विल डिफरेंशिएट बिटवीन कंस्ट्रक्टर एंड द मेथड. So our answer is a constructor must have the same name as the class while the method can have the any name. A constructor cannot have any return type while a method must have a return type or void if does not any return anything. A constructor cannot be abstract, static, final, synchronized while method can have this modifier. A constructor cannot be inherited by the subclasses while a method can have inherited by subclass. Means all the basis of this point, compiler will differentiate between the constructor and the method. Now we see how the JVM will differentiate between the constructor and the method. A constructor is invoked implicitly by the system when the new object is created by the using the new keyword. Means constructor is called implicitly by the system when we use the new keyword in our program, while a method is invoked by the programmer by its method call. Means there is no use, no right to a new keyword while calling a method. But when we call the constructor, we have to write a new keyword. A constructor is invoked, means constructor is called only once at a time of the object creation. But when we call a method, means method can be a call any number of times. A constructor initializes the object that does not exist while a method does operation on an object that already exists. This is our answer. The next question is how many type of the constructor in the Java? There are the three type of the constructor: default constructor, parameterized constructor and the copy constructor. But Java does not support a copy constructor. Default constructor is a constructor that has no parameter and is provided by the compiler if no other constructor is defined in the class. This is called the default constructor. Default constructor means a constructor that has no parameter is called the default constructor, and when we didn't provide any constructor, so compiler will create the default constructor automatically. And it set the default value for the field of the class such as 0 and null. If our variable is using in the integer data type, then it will be the 0, and if we are using string data type, then it will be the null. Now we see the what is parameterized constructor. A constructor that has one or more parameter and is defined by the programmer to initialize the field of a class with a specific value. Copy constructor means a constructor that takes another object of the same class as a parameter and copies the value of its field to the new object. This is called the copy constructor, but Java does not support the copy constructor by default. But if we have to use the copy constructor, we use the clone method. Next question is there any alternative given for the copy constructor? Yes, there are some alternative to use the copy constructor. But this question is not important, I think. So we will move the next question. Default constructor in a Java. A constructor that has no parameter is known as a default constructor, and when class does not declare any constructor, Java compiler automatically add the constructor for this class. We have seen the previous question, that is default constructor means when we does not declare any constructor, compiler will create this constructor automatically. All constructor that has no parameter is known as a default constructor. In other words, compiler has default constructor only when we do not define any constructor explicitly. And the constructor added by the compiler is called the default constructor. See, here we define any class school and here we didn't declare any constructor. But with the help of compiler or by compiler, it will generate this constructor. We cannot pass any argument to the default constructor. That's why it is also known as a no argument constructor. Also, the question generate like what is no argument constructor. So, default constructor and the no argument construction is a same. Feature of default constructor. Default constructor means when Java compiler add default constructor, it also add a statement called the super to call the superclass constructor. And default constructor does not accept any argument value and has no statement in its body except super statement. Now, next question is what is parameterized constructor? A constructor that takes one or more parameter and contains statement inside the body, it is called the parameterized constructor. In the parameterized constructor, instance variable automatically initialize at a runtime when we pass value to the parameter. The parameterized constructor is used to provide the different value to the object. It allows to initialize the instance variable with the values. In the case of default constructor, value remain identical for the all objects. See, we create the class demo and here class demo it will the default constructor. And here we print the zero argument constructor. Now parameterized constructor here we pass the variable int a and it is a one argument constructor. Also, we create another parameterized constructor and it accepting two values, int a, int b, and here we print the two argument constructor. In the main method, when we create a demo, d equal to new demo, it will call the default constructor. D equal to new demo which accept the one parameter means one argument, then it will calling the one argument constructor. And d equal to new demo, it will accepting two values, so it will call the two argument constructor. Now, the next question is, what is the difference between the constructor and the method? Constructor is a special type of method that is used to initialize the state of the object. Means that is used to initialize the object and method is used to expose the behavior of the object. Constructor has no return type, but method has a return type. If we don't provide any constructor in the class, then it will call the or declare the default constructor automatically by the compiler. But in the case of method is not provided by the compiler in any case. Constructor name must be the same as a class name. But in the case of method name may or may not be same as a class name. The purpose of constructor is to create the object of the class and the purpose of the method is to execute the functionality of the application. We can't inherit the constructor. Means constructor cannot be inherited but method can be inherited. Now the next question is, when can we use the private constructor? Private constructor means why we use the access modifier private if with any method or the class. Means we don't want to access it from the outside the class. That's why we use the private access modifier. So we will see our question and answer that when we can use private constructor. When we don't want to create the object of the particular class from outside, that time we use the constructor as a private, and by declaring constructor as a private, we are only allowed to create object within the same class only. We see the singleton classes are the good example of the private constructor. Also we give the example for that. Now the next question is, what will be the default access modifier of the constructor if we don't explicitly define it? मीन्स अगर हमने कंस्ट्रक्टर को कोई एक्सेस मॉडिफायर नहीं दिया तो वो बाय डिफॉल्ट कौन सा एक्सेस मॉडिफायर लेगा? द एक्सेस मॉडिफायर ऑफ द कंस्ट्रक्टर बाय डिफॉल्ट विल ऑलवेज बी द सेम एज द क्लास मॉडिफायर. If the class is public, then the constructor automatically will be the public. If the class will be the private, then constructor will also be the private. Any similarly applicable to another supported access modifier. Next question is, can we use two constructor in the same class? Yes, we can use the any number of constructor in the same class with the condition that parameterize of the constructor must be the different. There should be not forming any kind of recursion. Recursions mean from the no argument constructor or the defaulting constructor we will calling the parameterized constructor, and from parameterized constructor we are calling to the default constructor. So there should be not be forming any kind of the recursion. See, this is our first default constructor and this is the parameterized constructor. This dot means it will calling the parameterized constructor and it will calling the default constructor. This type code is not allow because it will form the recursion. No argument constructor will call the parameterized constructor and parameterized will call the no argument constructor. Next question is, can we override the constructor? No, the constructor we cannot override the constructor. Why we cannot override the constructor? Because we cannot inherit constructor. So we can't override it. Can a next question will be like, can we overload the constructor? Yes, we can overload the constructor. Can a constructor be a final in Java? No, constructor cannot be a final because final keyword are used to stop overriding the method to the derived class. Means why we use the final keyword? We use the final keyword with a class, method and the variable. When we use the final keyword with a method, then it can be override. When we use the final keyword with a class, then it can be inherited. And when we use the final keyword with a variable, it can be changed, means it will be remain constant. So constructor cannot be final because final keyword are used to stop the overriding the method of the derived class. But in the constructor, the override concept is not applicable. So there is no need to write the final keyword. And if we write the final keyword in the constructor, then we will get the compile time error. The question will be formed like, if we declare the constructor as a final, will we get any error? So we can say that we will get the compile time error. Can a constructor be a static? This is our next question. Can be a constructor be a static in a Java? The Java constructor cannot be static. It is because static keyword are used when we want to make a member belong to the class. But in the constructor concept, it is not belonging to the class. It is belonging to the object. So the compiler will create as the method and we get error require return type. The next question is, Java constructor cannot be abstract. Why Java constructor cannot be accept? This is one of the important property of the Java constructor is that it cannot be abstract. If we declare the constructor as abstract, if we have a implement, we have to give the implement to the child class. But we know constructor is called implicitly by the system when the new keyword is used. And it cannot be called as a normal method. Also, we make a constructor abstract, then we have to provide a body later, but we know constructor cannot be override, so providing body is impossible. And hence, we will do with this abstract constructor, we cannot provide implementation to the it. See, this is a GFG class and we will create the constructor abstract. This and here we print the and here declare the constructor as the abstract and in the main we create the object. So output will be the we get a error that modifier abstract not allow, means we cannot be declare constructor as abstract because there is no concept of the overriding in the constructor. So we can't give the implementation to the child class in the overriding in the sense of the constructor. This is our constructor interview questions and I'm trying to cover all interview questions regarding constructor and अगर कोई क्वेश्चन अगर रहेगा ही तो मैं पार्ट 2 में वो कवर कर लूँगी. Thank you guys.